From actors having their lives changed by on-set moments, to thousands of people developing an apparent medical condition after watching a specific blockbuster. These are those movies that got very, very real for some. So I'm Gareth, this is What Culture, and here are 10 times movies got too real. Number 10, post-Avatar depression syndrome becomes a thing, Avatar. Audiences honestly felt like they just got off a ship and entered into an almost tangible alien jungle back in 2009, and went out of their way to return for more Avatar fun time and time again, whilst the record-breaking flick was still in theaters. However, there was a downside to this epic story of Jake Sully and the Na'vi, with some fans actually finding themselves having to work through depression and suicidal thoughts in the wake of exiting the cinema and stepping back into our own harsh reality. It even got to a point where a topic thread was set up on an Avatar fan forum site, which gave fans a space to talk about their post-Avatar depression syndrome, while other members of the community did what they could to help their fellow Pandora lovers. There were those who thankfully found their depression was fading after spending time talking with others on these forums. But for a while there, many simply couldn't escape the feeling of wanting to escape their own reality and be with the Na'vi in this fictional universe post-Avatar viewing. Number 9, Sylvester Stallone was never the same after his Stone Cold fight, The Expendables. When clashing with WWE legend Stone Cold Steve Austin during the making of the first Expendables, Sylvester Stallone suffered a pretty serious neck injury, hairline fracture serious. He even ended up having a metal plate inserted into his neck after the very real on-set accident. But this wasn't simply a case of surgery solving all of his problems and being able to swiftly get on with the rest of his life. As noted in his recent Sly documentary on Netflix, Stallone doesn't feel that he ever truly recovered from that stone cold brawl during the making of The Expendables, saying that it did such a number on his body he's never been the same, never. And Stallone has understandably found himself asking whether throwing his body into this sort of perilous situation for the sake of entertainment was really worth it. And while we're on the subject of Stallone, I've got a quick question for you. What is your favourite ever Sly Stallone movie? Let me know in the comment section right down below. Number 8, Alex Wolff suffers from PTSD after filming Hereditary. It wasn't just those who sat down to watch Ari Aster's deeply disturbing dose of demonic horror Hereditary who were kept up at night by the chilling story of the Graham family. Alex Wolff, Peter in the film, went as far as to admit to Vice that he feels the flick stuck with him in real life during and after the making of it. The actor would struggle to sleep and even developed a habit of emotional masochism, finding himself trying to take in every negative feeling he could draw from. It's rather tough to make it out of your first viewing of this frightening supernatural 2-hour experience without feeling the need to sleep with the light on. So it's not that hard to understand why Wolff finds watching the film back a little tough now, with the star noting how he didn't feel it was possible to get through that sort of shooting experience and not suffer from some sort of PTSD in the aftermath. Number 7, Michael B. Jordan continues to isolate himself after Killmonger, Black Panther. Michael B. Jordan's compelling turn as Eric Killmonger in Ryan Coogler's first Black Panther flick was utterly magnificent. But believably portraying a figure who was as isolated and lonely as the flick's villain came at a very real price for the talented thespian. When it was time to say goodbye to the role back when that first flick wrapped, the fact Jordan refused to take this part lightly when preparing, and didn't have an escape plan for getting back out of it, according to an interview with Oprah Winfrey on the Super Soul Conversations TV special, led to him struggling to readjust to people caring about him again in real life. The star shut out and did not want any love once the shoot was over, opting to instead stay in a lonely place for as long as he could. In the end though, the gifted thespian turned to therapy and found that it helped him massively during this isolated period, with Jordan eventually telling Oprah during this chat that everyone needs to unpack and talk. Well said. Number 6, Brendan Fraser nearly died during a choking stunt, The Mummy. At one point in 1999's beloved action ride known as The Mummy, Brendan Fraser's Rick O'Connell finds himself in a rather sticky situation. After being dropped from a platform with a rope around his neck, the tough protagonist is left to slowly choke to death. Evelyn Carnahan was able to save his life in the end, of course, but in reality, Fraser didn't have Rachel Weisz to turn to when things got a little too real while shooting the tense sequence. As the eventual Oscar winner would explain on the Kelly Clarkson show earlier this year, his director, Stephen Sommers, had asked the star to do one more choking take after his attempts to look like he was really being strangled by a rope whilst on his tiptoes apparently didn't look legit enough. Once again, Fraser went up on his toes for that final take. However, instead of giving the star the opportunity to, act like he was being choked out, the crew member pulling the rope above him yanked on it a little too tightly. Sure enough, Fraser shockingly nearly died during this way too real hanging stunt. But at least he joined the same choked out on set club Mel Gibson did in Braveheart, eh? Yeah, that's something. Number 5. Gary Oldman's cigar smoking leads to nicotine poisoning, darkest hour. Gary Oldman's willingness to smoke Winston Churchill's favourite Cubans whenever a scene called for him to boast one in Darkest Hour actually led to the insanely dedicated star having to deal with some very real consequences. Oldman would later note to The Hollywood Reporter how going through over 400 of these bad boys during production resulted in him getting serious nicotine poisoning, with the star being handed a 3/4 smoked cigar, finishing it off over the course of a few takes, and then being handed another until they completed the scene in question. That's an awful lot of puffing, folks. But that ridiculous level of commitment at least paid off for the star come award season, with the British acting icon earning a long-awaited Oscar for his stellar and legitimately quite painful performance as the historical figure. Number 4. The alternate ending was too real to use. Get Out. After just about surviving his harrowing experience with the Armitage family, Chris Washington finds himself unable to strangle his horrendous former girlfriend Rose towards the end of Jordan Peele's exceptional Get Out. And it's here when the police seemingly show up at the worst possible moment, as Rose cries out for help and makes it look like Chris is the guilty party. Thankfully though, it's Chris's pal Rod who exits the vehicle, and the two swiftly leave behind all this brain-swapping madness. However, this wasn't always the plan when it came to the smash hit flick's conclusion. Instead, Peele initially went for an ending that felt all too real for many watching on, with that alternate closing stretch seeing Chris actually being arrested by cops for the murder of the Armitage family. Chris would then give up hope after realizing nobody believed his story, and the film would end on him not giving Rod any further information and simply telling his best mate that he'd stopped it. Ultimately, the director opted to drop this conclusion, which reflected the harsh, racist realities people were dealing with outside of the movie theatre, feeling that the audience deserved some relief and to catch a break after sitting through the prior shocking events. Number 3. James Cromwell becomes a vegan because of his animal co-stars, Babe. Before working alongside everything from pigs to ducks on 1995's Babe, James Cromwell had already been a vegetarian since 1974. However, as he told Take Part, the bond that he eventually forged with those animals on set led him to hugely care about their welfare. So when it came time for lunch whilst playing Farmer Arthur Hoggett in the flick, the sight of all that meat in front of him became too real, and ultimately forced him to go the whole hog, so to speak. And he did exactly that, opting to go vegan from that point onwards, before deciding to work with Peter once the film had wrapped. Fast forward to earlier this year, and Cromwell is still looking out for adorable piglets, helping to save a baby pig who fell off a slaughter truck in April, before naming the little survivor Babe, of course. That'll do, Cromwell. Number 2. One sex scene was so real it got them in trouble, Blue Valentine. Everyone involved in the creation of 2010's raw look at romance known as Blue Valentine were clearly aiming to produce a love story that felt as real as humanly possible. And they absolutely achieved that goal and then some, with the superb Ryan Gosling and Michelle Williams getting entirely lost in Dean Pereira and Cindy Heller's lives during the shooting of this often difficult to watch marriage. That realness also extended to the scenes involving the pair having sex too, which is something that actually ended up getting the folks behind the film in trouble, as the movie ended up in a classification rating fight over in the States due to one specific oral sex scene. Said battle ultimately did little to keep the film from earning an impressive $60 million on a $1 million budget though, or Gosling and Williams from picking up a number of awards nominations that year. But there was certainly a time there when it looked like this incredibly authentic intimacy was too real for the MPAA ratings board. Number 1. The cops are called during the editing process, Saw 10. A number of things are typically guaranteed in your average installment of the Saw franchise. Multiple sickening traps designed to torture various humans, and the blood-curdling sound of their screams as they attempt to stay amongst the living. And it was that latter element that actually resulted in a particularly awkward moment for Saw 10's first assistant editor Steve Thorne, when he was trying to complete the sound design for one extreme scene. According to the director of the latest chunk of gory horror, Kevin Grudert, Vaughn's attempts to finish off the moment that focused on a gruesome eye vacuum trap led to a rather unexpected conversation, with said sequence involving an awful lot of cries of terror, along with some pretty disturbing sound effects. Vaughn's neighbors hilariously decided to call the police on him. The cops soon explained that these folks had informed the police that someone was seemingly being tortured to death in Vaughn's place, based on the way too real sounding shrieks. This editor then swiftly noted how he was just trying to do his job and finish off the scene he was working on for the movie, even offering those cops the chance to look at the footage to prove his innocence before they chuckled and left the poor bloke alone. You can bet Vaughn experienced his fair share of peculiar looks when grabbing the paper that week. Yikes. And that's our list of any other times that movies got too real. Well, let us know all about them in the comment section right down below, and don't forget to like, share, and click on that subscribe button while you're down there. Also, if you like this sort of stuff, then please head on over to whatculture.com and find some more fantastic articles just like the one this video you're watching right this second is based on. I've been the way too real Gareth from What Culture. Thank you very much for watching this video today, and hopefully we'll see you soon. Bye bye!